Welcome to this week's edition of Inside Scoop Virginia. My name is George Burke. I'll be your host. Tonight, my guest is Doug Deneny. He is a Democratic candidate for the 11th Congressional District seat here in Virginia. In the interest of full disclosure, I want to make sure my viewers know I am the chair of the 11th Congressional District Democratic Committee. We have two candidates in the race right now. There are a couple more expected, possibly. You never know in the world of politics. This is our inaugural show. I'm going to have all these candidates on individually, and my hope is I'll get them all on together as the campaign progresses before the primary, which will be held in June. Doug was the first to announce and was the first to appear on my show. It's the way it is. Doug's a graduate of the U.S. Naval Academy. He's a retired Navy commander and a naval flight officer. He was a Top Gun instructor, for those of you who are old enough to remember the movie. He worked at the Pentagon and on Capitol Hill. He worked for the Joint Chiefs of Staff, and he currently is employed by Boeing, and he sells jets, among other things. Doug, welcome to the show.
Thanks, George. Great to be here. Thanks for having me.
I hope Doug's 45, by the way, this is your first run for political office. You know, obviously, as a naval officer, you didn't have the ability to and being too involved in politics, per se. Let's get right into it. Let's get right into the Iraq War. You and I have chatted before, and that clearly is going to be one of the cornerstones of your campaign. So spend a couple of minutes telling me and our viewers in terms of where do you stand on the war?
You bet. George, it's the most important issue at the federal level in 2008. We all know about what's happening and the direction the war is taken. The war is it's a problem for us, not only here at home, but overseas. What's happened under the leadership of the George Bush administration has been, in many regards, a debacle. And one of the most important things for me to talk about in this campaign is the direction of the Iraq War and how we need to change it. I fully believe that everything that we do militarily needs to be backed up with political leadership, and it needs to be backed up with political leadership not only here in the United States, but most importantly over in Iraq. So what I believe is we need to have a tough love policy with Iraqi politicians. We need to have the leadership to tell the Iraqis that we're not going to be here forever. We're not going to be backing your administration up forever. We need to begin a smart phased withdrawal. We've seen some recent success in the surge. That's wonderful. The military of the U.S. military has once again taken the mission on and given that breathing space. But now with that breathing space, we need to have those Iraqi politicians stand up and negotiate with their different factions.
Isn't part of this, there are some cultural issues we have to deal with here. The Bush administration came in attempting to topple Saddam Hussein and also put a democracy in place in the country of Iraq. Well, it has been a country of tribes since almost the beginning of time.
Right.
And democracy is not something that is well known, well understood, or practiced per se in most of the countries in the Middle East. They're kingdoms, they have different types of government, and their laws are a great deal different than us. And there are the cultural issues. I mean, I'm not going to suggest that that's one of the oldest cultures on earth.
Right.
I see that as being part of the problem in this Iraq war, that we don't understand that culture, and we're trying to put things on their people and their government that they're not used to dealing with and the like. And I think the communication is horrible in terms of the real communication in terms of getting anything done. To me, we're just in a morass that we're never going to get out of if we don't get out of there soon. I mean, get out of there in a way that protects our people and attempts to protect innocent civilians in Iraq, but to get the heck out of there.
I completely agree, and that's why I refer to it as a smart phase withdrawal. As we know, the diplomatic challenges are going to be huge. We need to continue to engage diplomatically. We need to increase those forces as we even bring down our U.S. military forces. But when I talk about a smart phase withdrawal, we've been training Iraqi police and Iraqi army for a long time, and we spent billions and billions of dollars to do that. Now it's time to put those chips on the table and say it's time for you to put your forces more in the line of fire than what our forces are. So let's continue to start bringing our forces out of the cities, bring them out to the bases that ring outside of Baghdad and the other areas, start bringing the forces down, keep about 35,000 in Iraq, start phasing some out to Kuwait, continue going after the small pockets of al-Qaeda, continue to train and advise the Iraqi military, but we need to start telling them, you need to bring your forces in and you need to negotiate. And you need to negotiate with those factions you just talked about. Not only the tribal leadership with the Sunni Shiites, up with the Kurds to the north, and we need to do more diplomatic work throughout the region so that the partners in that area come and work together.
Now, you were in Iraq. How long were you over there?
Well, interesting question. I started off doing this Operation Southern Watch, and that started right after the first Gulf War. So I was there in the summer of '93 flying over Iraq. And as you all probably know, United Nations put out the no-fly zones in the northern and southern parts. So I spent many years flying over Iraq, starting in 1992 and working all the way up to what we refer to as the Gulf War. Now, I got there in December of 2002 with my aircraft carrier. I was the executive officer of a fighter squadron. We patrolled that no-fly zone, and then we were there for the kickoff. The kickoff referred to as Shock and Awe, March of 2003. Correct. I actually led the first strike into Baghdad of non-stealth aircraft. We came in right at the end of the Tomahawk missiles landing, and when Saddam's forces came up to attack us. And then we were there throughout the surge up into Baghdad and the capitulation of Saddam's government. So I was there for that part, and I was there for about 2 months, and then we headed back to the United States.
Now let's go into the political side of the Iraq War. Senator Webb has worked valiantly on the Senate side to try and affect some change, and he's one of 100. And sometimes I think he feels like he's banging his head against the wall. Certainly, the administration has held steadfast in their positions, but the Democrats don't have the supermajority in the Senate. They don't have the 60 votes they need to truly affect change. Moving over to the House, there are a lot of people, including a lot of Democrats, who feel that so far even the new Democratic majority in the Senate has been relatively ineffective. Now, I will give them the benefit of the doubt on the situation that they don't have that big a majority. Correct. And when you pull in some of the real Southern Democrats, some of the conservative Democrats, it's hard to reach a consensus, and there are a lot of parliamentary maneuvers and plays that can be made to bog down these pieces of legislation, and knowing that if it gets through both houses and gets to the president, if you don't have a veto-proof majority, you lose anyway. How will you make a difference? You're going to come in, you'll be a freshman congressman. It's pretty clear to me that whomever wins the 11th district seat, if they are the Democrat, will in fact be part of a Democratic majority, and probably a larger Democratic majority than we have there now. There are 16 Republican seats that are destined to retirement. So how do you make a difference as a new congressman? Certainly you have some expertise and some understanding, but how do you truly break through that role and get things done?
Yes, well, first let me just say that...
And I'm not trying to be overly harsh on you, because it doesn't matter who it is who comes from this seat or any new freshman. You know, you've got to learn where the bathrooms are and stuff first, obviously, but also it's just, I worked on the Hill for over a decade, and it's really tough to truly affect change sometimes.
Right. Right. Well, I worked on the Hill as well. I spent a year as a legislative fellow in Capitol Hill, very comfortable. I have a certificate in legislative studies from Georgetown, and get a master's there as well. And then I spent a year as a legislative liaison for the chairman of the Joint Chiefs of Staff. The national Democrats, I think, get it. They understand that Doug Deneny in Congress is something that we need. And to give you an example, Congressman Patrick Murphy, an Iraq War veteran, just endorsed me for this race. He knows that what he needs is someone standing or sitting right next to him on the House Armed Services Committee and being a very strong voice. You know, the American people get it. The Democratic congressmen get it. The Republican leadership does not get it. So to answer your question, I will be a strong voice standing up, even as a freshman, as a veteran, as someone who earned a Distinguished Flying Cross with Combat V in Iraq, has 6 air medals, has been shot at, has put his skin in the game, standing up and saying, we are on the wrong track and we need leadership now, Democratic leadership as a presidency, to fix this problem, and we will work together with your Democratic Congress to fix it. And we will remove the funding if that's what we need to do. We will change the policy if that's what we need to do. But we will stand I will be a strong voice, and that's the most important reason why I need to be in that seat.
It will be a different climate, no doubt, if we do elect a Democrat to president. And I think, at least at this point, the chances look pretty good, but anything can change in the world of politics.
Absolutely.
We have a few minutes left before we go to our first break. Let's talk politics a little bit. And just for our viewers, Doug is a candidate in the race. We recently saw Leslie Byrne, who held the seat for one term, 93 to 95. She was defeated in 94 when the Republicans took over the House. There is speculation and talk that Fairfax County Chair Jerry Conley may very well enter the race. That remains to be seen. We'll see when that happens. There's even some talk that the Andy Hurst, who was the 06 nominee, may enter the race. I think that's getting more distant, but you know, there were certainly people talking about him. And a lot of this at this point, other than you and Leslie, is talk. It's going to be a tough primary, any way you cut it. And I want to get to this again after the break, and you can even have a couple of minutes to think about it. But you're going to be facing, right now you're facing a former congresswoman in the nomination. And you may end up facing a former congresswoman and the chairman of the Fairfax County Board of Supervisors. How do you position yourself? Well, how do you differentiate yourself?
Absolutely. I have leadership experiences that I believe are unmatched by any of my future competition or current competition. I've led a Navy fighter squadron. I've led people in combat. I know how to make the tough choices and the tough decisions. The number one issue is the Iraq War. It is something that we have to deal with as a nation. We have to talk about strong defense. I will own that issue. I will own that issue. And then I also have great experience in the local area. I'm the president of my Citizens Association. I am on 2 county boards. I was on a third. I do one that deals with the environment. I do one that dealt with the future of Tyson's Corner. More than happy to talk to you about that a little bit later on. And I'm one that raises bonds for hospitals. So I'm very comfortable talking about local issues. I understand how important it is to have the streets cleared from snow. I know how important it is to have stop signs put up and lost cats found, all the way up to the important county issues. And then I put on top of that my leadership experience, my great decision making. The choices I've made have come out very well, and I can talk with strength with the number one issue. That's how I differentiate myself.
I would suggest that either Byrne or Connolly are pretty good orators in their own rights, and obviously also I think they will have the grasp. It's going to be interesting to really see. You may not ultimately be able to decide what differentiates you. It may be sort of the marketplace of ideas that does, or the press coming in and asking specific questions. They're going to be looking to parse differences between each of you. And I am extremely, I hope very much, I guess is a better way to put it, that the Post gives a lot of coverage to this race. I think, particularly depending on what the incumbent Tom Davis does, that this will be viewed as very much a national race. This will be viewed as one of the top races in the country, and I hope that the press spends the time to look at the primary before we get into the general. And we're going to get back to that in 2 minutes. I hope you'll hang in with us. My name is George Burke. I'm the host here at Inside Scoop Virginia. We have Doug Dinenny with us, 11th District Democratic primary candidate for Congress. See you soon.
This is Mommy's bed. Me and Jenny were jumping on it. Mommy's gun fell on the floor. I was a cowboy. Bang, 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 bang. I said, Jenny, wake up, it's just pretend. But she wouldn't wake up. If you give me a fish.
If you give someone a fish,
you feed them for a day.
Teach someone to fish.
You feed them for a lifetime.
Give me a fish. and you'll feed me for a day. Teach me to fish, and you'll feed me for a lifetime.
Through Volunteers of America, you can help change lives in your community.
Oh, hey, mister, studied algebra in school and got a better job than I could. You take the last cup.
Oh, no, mister. Stuck in an entry-level job because you only learned basic math. I don't have a boss riding my butt like you do, so you take it so you can get back to your desk.
You know, I probably should, but maybe Miss AP Calculus with the $200 haircut in the big office upstairs would like a cup.
Oh, no, Mr. What was your name again? Never mind, it doesn't matter. I'm too busy doing important things to care. I just came down for some sweet and start.
You know, if my limited math abilities weren't keeping me from getting a better job, I'd quit this afternoon.
I don't blame you. But thank goodness you're stuck here because we really need someone to make the coffee.
Welcome back to Inside Scoop, Virginia. My name is George Burke. My guest today is Doug Deneny. He's running for Congress in Virginia's 11th Congressional District. We were talking a little bit before the break about the primary. And again, some people talk about if Connally enters the race, and there's some speculation that he will, that it's going to be the battle of the Titans, and that you're going to be squeezed in the middle. These folks have been around a long time. They have the pluses and the minuses of the voters knowing them. You need to make a distinct effort to introduce yourself to the voters. And that can be one of your toughest jobs. You know, it's not like running for a House of Delegates district. It's 650,000 plus people in 2 counties in Fairfax and Prince William, and 2/3 of it in Fairfax, and a piece of it in Fairfax City. You can't knock on doors. I mean, they're doing it in the Forget race right now in the 1st district.
Sure.
But the turnout's going to be so low.
Right.
This time the turnout will be high. It's a presidential year. You're going to have a lot of people coming out. Less in the primary. The presidential primary would be February, and so I shouldn't go beyond that primary at this point. But I do in one way. Ultimately, as it stands now, we have not heard from incumbent Tom Davis whether he's going to run for another term or not. Over the course of his more recent career, we have seen his numbers drop every year. Right. He was down to 10% this time, and he outspent Andy Hurst 10-1, $3 million plus to like $360,000. I think it was the most expensive race any incumbent waged in the nation for Congress, and he only pulled 10% out of it. This district is blue. It's more than 50% Democratic. The problem is that the voters have been comfortable with Davis. Even after he had to move far to the right to protect his leadership position within the Republicans. So let's talk a little bit about Tom Davis. Well, let's presume he's in the race at this point. And of course, many of us, there's a lot of speculation he's going to leave, there's speculation he's going to stay. The reality of the matter is nobody knows.
Right.
So let's operate on the premise for the time being that he's still in the race. How do you run against Tom Davis?
Well, first of all, you mentioned Mr. Forget. I was just down knocking doors on him recently. It's important for us to have other Democrats win, and I wish him the best of luck. And for anybody that's watching from that region, please vote for him on Tuesday. We need another Democrat in that, and there's a very good chance he can win that race. Good point about Tom. Tom is. Well, let me talk about myself just for a second. I am an agent of change. Okay, I am a change agent. I'm not a career politician. I know how Capitol Hill works. Like I said, I was up there for a year. Served up there as a legislative liaison for the chairman of the Joint Chiefs of Staff. I know how the Hill works, very comfortable in that environment. But I'm an outsider and I'm an agent of change. People across this country continue to tell us, and people I talk to here tell us, we want something different, we want something better. We want someone who has demonstrated leadership capability and demonstrated new ideas that can come in and serve at least a 2-year term and maybe more. And that is what I'm going to talk about. That's how I'm going to beat Tom Davis, because Americans are tired of 7 years of George Bush leadership, and I believe people in this district are tired of what's been 13 years of Tom Davis's leadership. It's time to bring new ideas, new vision, And that's really what the framers of the Constitution, they wanted a 2-year term in there. They wanted people to come in to serve, and if the voters didn't like what they did, they'll turn them out. And I think Tom Davis is feeling that pressure, and he's going to feel that pressure from me, because I will raise the resources. This will be a national race, like you mentioned. There will be money coming into this race, not only from great citizens here in the 11th District, but nationally. People know that Tom Davis is vulnerable, and I'm the change agent that can beat him.
We got somebody who's watching us, one of our 3 viewers tonight. Fred from Oakton. Fred, welcome to the show. You have a question for us?
Yeah, my question is, you know, I'm watching and I'm seeing that Doug Dinenny talking about Iraq, and seems like he knows exactly what we're looking for not only the state of Virginia, for the nation. And right now, as you know, national security is #1 priority for American people. And I'd like to see if when Doug be our new congressman, or when become new congressman, is he going to talk about border security and immigration also? Because that's part of national security.
Voter security here and border security. Yeah, well, we can go right into that, because it's certainly one of the issues that we wanted to discuss. The reality of the matter is that neither the Republican administrations nor the Democratic administrations on the federal level have been successful in dealing with our immigration issue. This is not something new. I've said this on the show a few times. I wrote an op-ed piece for a member of Congress I worked for in the mid-'80s about this issue. And even at that time, a liberal Democrat was saying we had to secure our borders. Well, here we are 20-plus years later, and our borders are just as porous as they were then. They're going to put up hundreds of miles of fences, but our border is thousands of miles long. Right. So you just shift the burden of where people enter the country. Even in terms of our airport security and the like, there have been some stories recently noting that there are still gaping holes in it. GAO investigators or some kind of security investigators were able to bring some materials through that were capable of producing bombs, taking them through airport security. Where do we stand? What do we do? Let me say one more thing, and Doug and I have talked about this, and talking with most other Democrats. You know, we have to combat the demagoguery that the Republicans used to some degree successfully this time around in our state elections. I think they were test marketing it, and there was a lot of fear-mongering and the like. So, Doug, address Fred, if you will.
You bet. Yeah, Fred, it's a great question. Thanks for your words of support early on about Iraq. But you're right, this is a federal issue. Border security and immigration is a federal issue. And, you know, I'm going to talk about what the illegal immigration issue in a second, but we all know that we have a problem with just legal immigration, just the backlog and visas, and the people that want to come through the front door still have issues getting through. And so, you know, now we have an illegal immigration on top of that. I think is partly due to the fact that we have so many problems with legal immigration. So look at illegal immigration. We know that people want to come to America for a variety of different reasons. I'm going to make some generalizations, but really a lot of them are coming here for jobs and a better way of life.
No doubt.
Economic, no question about it.
I think that's correct.
You build a 32-foot fence, they're going to find a 34-foot ladder. I completely agree with that, George. But it is the federal government's responsibility to secure our border. So we'll continue to do smart initiatives, things like electronic surveillance. We're not going to stop everybody because the jobs are here. So let's look at why the jobs are here. Well, we're a booming economy compared to what our neighbors are. There's no question about it. The ability of the people to work inside the U.S. government without being, the U.S. borders without being caught is a rationalization that they will make because they want to further their families and their way of life. Now, some want to stay here forever. Others just want to make a certain amount of money and bring it back. So you have a mixed bag of problems. The solutions are going to be varied, and I'm eager to look forward to them. One of the ideas that I have is that we need to take the people that are here illegally, incentivize them to somehow come under some type of federal oversight. Not a green card, not amnesty, not necessarily path of citizenship, but let's put them in the position where they can be regulated so that they can start paying legally taxes. Because what we see in many cases are people are not necessarily upset with the fact that they're here illegally. They're upset with the fact that they are getting access to services that taxpayers are paying for. So we need to have an ability for them to get involved economically with us and pay their fair share of taxes so that the services that they use, that U.S. citizens are not paying the only brunt of the taxes.
What about the argument that's made predominantly by the Republicans, but I've heard a few Democrats say it as well, that these people came in illegally, we can't give them, award them or give them any kind of incentives to stay because they should go back and try to come in through the front door like everybody else, and like all the people who've been waiting to come in the front door. How do we deal with that?
Well, it's impossible to take all 12 million or 14 million of them and round them up and say, okay, you have no future here in America, you have no path. There needs to, eventually there will have to be some form of path to citizenship. But as a first step, and this is going to take compromise, it's going to take me as the congressman working with both sides of the aisle, and we need to find a rational solution that allows us to use their economic power and might to our betterment, our nation's betterment. We need these people working in America. They're not here because they weren't wanted somewhere else. They were wanted here, and so we need to keep using them as an economic engine, but have them pay their fair share. So the answer to your question is we can't round them up, we can't send them home. We do need to eventually have some path towards legal citizenship, but let's at least regulate and find out what the bounds of the problem are and make them contribute economically to our situation.
Do you support the whole employer sanction issue, that you sanction employers who hire illegals and fine them in an effort to, I guess, dry up some of the employment opportunities that they have? I mean, this has been one of the things that, again, none of this is easy, black and white on either side of the partisan divide even. Exactly. There are some people on both sides. But a lot of people have suggested the the employer sanctions are something that works. What do you think about that?
Well, it is the employer's responsibility to check the proper identification. And there are processes in place where they go ahead and take a Social Security card, a green card, and run it through the system. We all know the black market exists, and the ability for people to get fraudulent documentation brings that on. If an employer is doing what they can to determine what they need to, then so be it. There shouldn't be sanctions. But if you have someone out, I'm going to make a generalization, but making wholesale, let's go out and round up, I know they're illegal, I'm not even going to check, then absolutely. Then that's when the employer is at fault. But if the employer in good faith is doing what he or she can to bring people to work for them that are at least here legally, then they should not be penalized for using the government systems that are already in place to check IDs.
The immigration issue is certainly a complex one, and there have been a lot of good minds who've dealt with it. It's a slippery slope. Everywhere you turn, there's a different angle to it.
And the other thing I want to always keep in mind is that these are human people, human beings. These are real people that really need to have us as leaders and me working in Congress to find common sense solutions for both sides. Time flies when we're having fun. My guest today is Doug Dinaney, candidate for 11th Congressional District on the Democratic side. He will have a primary, and we'll be back in 2 minutes.
Know what public access means.
Some think it's just another channel on the dial.
But it's much more than that.
It's the voice of the people.
People like you.
Your neighbors, your friends,
or your family.
People who want to share ideas,
opinions,
cultures,
lifestyles,
art,
sports, music,
events, entertainment,
history,
science,
beliefs.
People who want to learn about television,
producing,
directing,
cameras, audio,
lighting,
editing, or radio, talk, music.
Whatever you think people should hear.
Public access is the place where everyone has a voice.
And it's the place where that voice gets heard.
A place where you can create your own form of personal expression.
So what do you want to say?
Whatever it is,
you can say it here.
Because we're public access.
For the people.
By the people.
It is about balancing our choices between the gray of the concrete jungle and the stunning beauty of the real one, between a stoic facade of granite and the fury of the canyon. It's why there's EarthShare, the simple way to find balance. EarthShare is the workplace giving program bringing the leading environmental groups under one umbrella. Support EarthShare, support them all. EarthShare. Please ask your employer about workplace giving. To learn more, visit our website.
Thousands of kids in this country have everything it takes to go to college, except the money. The United Negro College Fund. A mind is a terrible thing to waste.
Welcome back to Inside Scoop, Virginia. My name is George Burke. Doug Dinenny, candidate for Congress in Virginia's 11th Congressional District, is my guest. Doug is running in what is now a two-way primary. We've already voted to have a primary. It'll be held in June. It could very well be a three-way primary. We may even see a four-way primary, but I think it'll probably end up being three, but who knows until the fat lady sings, so to speak. You're gonna have to raise some money. Again, whether it's just Leslie Byrne or it's Leslie Byrne and somebody else, I suspect these other people coming in the race have raised money before. This is, again, the first time you're raising money. Where are you going to get it, and where's it coming from, and what have you put in the bank so far, if I can ask?
Well, I tell you what, George, it's a great question. Unfortunately, the way politics works is before they count the votes, people start counting the money. And that is, unfortunately, the way it works, and that means that we spend a lot of time going after dollars. Mm-hmm. I prefer to think of it as going after voters and talking to people about change. And what's happened, George, is that people are, the things I was saying early on about how they're tired of politics as usual, they're tired about the same old, same old. You know, I remember just this morning seeing in the news Oprah Winfrey talking about Barack Obama. Now, Barack's doing a little better in money than I am. I won't tell you the exact differences, but he's doing okay. Oprah said some really important things, and it says about change. And it's if you want what you've always had before, keep doing what you're doing. If you want something new, you got to go with something new like me. And so what's happened is I've brought this message of change to people. They've responded. And to give you an example, Patrick Murphy, congressman, has endorsed me. He understands that. He's coming out. He's doing a fundraiser for me on Tuesday night, December 11th. Anyone can go to my website at dougforcongress.com. They can find out all the details for that, and they can also donate right on my website. I do other things. I like to communicate to people. I like to do blogging. I go on live blogs. I write real time. People can send questions into me. I respond. So for me, raising money is about outreach. It's about talking to voters. And what the voters are saying is we've got a combat veteran who can talk about the #1 issue. He's experienced in local issues as well. He's just generally a darn good guy that's going to continue to work for us and work his tail off. I consider myself purely a public servant, and people are responding to that.
Well, I'll tell you, I mean, I've watched over the last 30-plus years the rise and the ascendancy of money in the political process. I agree with you. I think the media spends too much time judging a campaign by how much money they raised alone. But the fact of the matter is you need the money to pay the staff, you need the money to put out the mail, and in a market like the Northern Virginia area, our television is so expensive that mail plays a critical role. You need money to get on TV and to buy the signs and do all these things. But we saw races this year. We saw state Senate race, the Chap Peterson's victorious race over Jean Marie Devilites Davis, Tom Davis's wife, by the way. I mean, they spent $1 million a piece or something like that. I mean, over $1 million. I just can't imagine how much this congressional race is going to end up costing in the long run. Now, granted, whoever wins the nomination, I suspect we will see the Democratic Congressional Campaign Committee and the Republican counterparts in there. But the fact of the matter is, until you get through the primary, 99 9/10% of the time you're on your own. Right. And every candidate is on their own. And you're going to learn, if you haven't already, that you're going to have call time every day, and it's tedious, and certainly you get to talk to people, but instead of spending a lot of time talking about the issues, you have to ask them for money. Right. It's I don't want to say seamy, but it's an unfortunate side to the game. And it's got to be tough for a first-time candidate to really start racking in the dough. I mean, you have to get out there so people know who you are first, I guess. I mean, you tell me.
Completely agree, George. And it's always a challenge. But like I said, what happens is people, when they respond, they say, listen, we understand what's going on. We understand how important this, the people in the 11th Congressional District, and I'm going to make another generalization, they're bright. they're sharp, they get it.
I'll even go you one better. I have the demographics. It is the wealthiest congressional district in the nation, and it's the most highly educated congressional district in the nation. And we probably know more about what's going on in Washington than anybody else.
Right, exactly.
Half the time they don't pay any attention to our local races. All they focus on is Washington.
It is. And so what we've seen is great outpouring of support for the Democratic candidates, as you mentioned, in November, and great outpouring financial support as well. Now we're in this phase now where they're starting to turn towards a presidential and just starting to pay attention to us. And because they're smart, they understand how important it is for the Democrats to win this seat from Republicans. First, we can do it. Second, they're finding that there is a candidate out there that can do it. And that's me, Doug Dinenny. So they are responding to me when I call them on the telephone. They're responding to me on my website, DougForCongress.com. They can go on it at any time and contribute. And the reason why they're contributing is because they realize that it's time to bring someone here that is just not going to take their dollars. And I'm not going to waste any dollars of theirs. I'm going to use a very smart, I've already hired great staff. I'm hiring even smarter and more experienced people that are going to come on board and maximize the use of those dollars so that we are going to win this primary. And then the national dollars are going to come in and back up the donations and contributions that we've received here from the 11th.
Let me ask another political question. Okay. Let's hypothetically say that Connally gets in the race. I mean, there's a lot of indicators there are, but he hasn't said anything publicly at this point, and so we just don't know. If he enters the race and you have Leslie Byrne in the race, who draws more votes from you? Who is the one who's going to take votes from you? I mean, each of them, I'm sure, are looking, am I going to lose votes to Dinenny? Is Dinenny going to take votes away from me or take them away from Connally? Is Connally going to take votes away from Dinenny? So what's your pick on it? If both of them are in the race, and I understand I'm being a little unfair because Connally isn't in the race at this point, but if both of them are in the race, who would draw more votes from your campaign?
Anybody who wants to vote for change and wants to change the direction of the 11th Congressional District and wants to change the direction of Congress, they're going to be voting for me in this primary. So that's an easy equation for my opponents or potential opponents. It's just that simple. Everybody who wants change and wants to worry about the future for their children, if you want to worry about the future for your children, you need to vote for me. Like you said, 45 years old, I've got the energy and the experience, the knowledge, and I'm going to work my tail off. That's who's going to be my voters. So that's where the other candidates, or potential candidates, can take a look for the votes.
I take it your slogan is going to deal with change,
yes.
to say the least. You guys are going to end up mixing it up, whether it's a two-way race with you and Leslie Byrne, whether it's a three-way race with a third candidate or not. It's going to get intense. How prepared are you to get in the trenches and duke it out? You know, and I say this first as the 11th District Chair and as a Democrat. I hope that all the candidates really debate the issues. You know, I mean, that's what we want to see. That's what truly is the most important piece in differentiating between candidates in this race, is the issues. I worry sometimes that there'll be some outside influences who'll try to put other stresses on it and try to bring it more into the realm of personalities and the like. But you know, this is not a popularity contest. This is a contest about who on the Democratic side can do the best job and who on the Democratic side can best defeat that Republican, whomever it is, whether it's Tom Davis or somebody out of the blue. And I personally think if Tom doesn't run, I don't think there's a strong Republican candidate out there who will beat our Democratic nominee. I just don't see it. Tom's thrown a couple of names out of possibilities, only in speculation. I just don't see it happening. So how do you intend to mix it up?
Right. Well, first of all, I don't plan on being in the trench. I plan on being above the trench. If people want to jump into the trench and fight each other out, go ahead. That's politics as usual. I'll be above the trench. However, if I'm required to fight, I'll fight. I'm a combat aviator. I trained to fight my entire life. I'm a very competitive guy, in case anybody can't figure that out. As a Top Gun instructor, as a trainer of Navy fighter pilots, I know what it takes to fight and win and prepare. So I will be prepared. If people take me on, I will engage, and I'll step back and be a gentleman. Because the real fight is what we're going to do on Capitol Hill. I want the voters to know that I'll fight for them. There's no question about it. But the voters also want someone who will be above the fray, and that's where I'm going to be.
Let's, we have several minutes before we break again, and let's just cover a couple of other issues very quickly. Let's go right to the choice issue. We talked earlier, you're pro-choice. I mean, unabashedly, it's a position that, most Democrats take, and it's certainly a responsible and reasonable position. So I just wanted to get it out on the table so our viewers know. Let's talk a little bit about health care. It is a horrific problem in this country. I don't think that many people truly realize how horrific it is. Folks, there's no portability of benefits in most instances. So somebody who has a pre-existing condition and loses their job or moves to another job all of a sudden discovers they require medication that costs thousands of dollars a week that they can't get. There are 40+ million Americans who lack any form of insurance at all dealing with health. There are many, many children. I mean, we've tried to close the gap here in Virginia, not totally, but it's been fairly successful. But we saw Bush opposing that S-chip program. We saw Tom Davis, I believe, opposing it, I think.
Correct.
And I'm on a little shaky ground there, and I apologize if I'm incorrect. But certainly most Republicans were opposing it. So where do we go? What do we do? Are you a single payer guy? Do you want to deal with the corporate folks? I know it's a complex issue, and I'm asking you to distill it in a couple of minutes.
No, it's a great question, because that issues are important. Iraq war affects everybody, even though they don't think it does affect everybody.
It affects our economy.
Absolutely.
I mean, the money drain alone,
overseas.
Besides the loss of life that families are facing across this country.
Right. Transportation, of course, affects us every day. Access to affordable health care affects us every day. It's a great question. And my quick answer to that is that I do not believe just in a government-only solution. I believe that there needs to be a partnership between commercial and also government. In other words, I want everybody to have access to affordable health care. Rising health care costs are the driver for this issue. It's not necessarily that Medicare is a poor program or a bad program. The fact is we have rising health care costs. So that needs to be addressed in one piece. The other piece is we do have a very strong employee-based health care program. It doesn't work for everybody, as you just mentioned. Transfer of payments, you have problems with someone with a pre-existing condition that comes up, loses their job. Horrible problem. So what we need to do is we need to provide governmental incentives to private carriers to allow them to take these people with pre-existing conditions. So there's government involvement in private usage. That's something that I support. Also, there needs to be a very strong and robust Medicare, Medicaid system, state and or federal with Medicaid. But we need to have a safety net. It is, I'm not going to say it's inconceivable because it exists right now, but it is sad that our country has not yet been able to have the leadership and the guts to solve this problem, to take on the special
We're the only developed country in the world, the only certainly first world country, so to speak, industrialized nation that does not have universal health care, whatever form.
Exactly.
I may not agree with the total ways these other countries do it, but you're in those countries, and if you get sick, you get taken care of. And there are people out on the street with mental illness issues. There are people on the street. I mean, the Los Angeles hospital that was dumping people at the Union Street Mission in LA. I mean, it's just horrible, and we've got to do something.
And the way I look at it too is I'm lucky guy. I was a naval aviator, great health care, in good shape, families in good, wonderful wife, 2 wonderful kids, 12 years old, 8-year-olds, in good health. But everybody in this area is just one catastrophe away from falling into the safety net, and we need to take care of it. We can't just think of our own family, we've got to think of everybody else.
We'll get back to this in 2 minutes. I thank you all for watching. I'm George Burke. My guest today is Doug Denneny, running for Congress. This is Inside Scoop, Virginia, and I hope you'll stick around to watch the last segment of the show.
This is Mommy's bed. Me and Jenny were jumping on it. Mommy's gun fell on the floor. I was a cowboy. Bang, 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 bang. I said, Jenny, wake up, it's just pretend. But she wouldn't wake up.
If you give me a fish.
If you give someone a fish.
You feed them for a day.
teach someone to fish.
You feed them for a lifetime.
Give me a fish, and you'll feed me for a day. Teach me to fish, and you'll feed me for a lifetime.
Through Volunteers of America, you can help change lives in your community.
Oh, hey, mister, studied algebra in school and got a better job than I could. You take the last cup.
Oh, no, mister. Stuck in an entry-level job because you only learn basic math. I don't have a boss riding my butt like you do, so you take it so you can get back to your desk.
You know, I probably should, but maybe Miss AP Calculus with the $200 haircut in the big office upstairs would like a cup.
Oh, no, Mr. What was your name again? Never mind, it doesn't matter. I'm too busy doing important things to care. I just came down for some sweet and stir.
You know, if my limited math abilities weren't keeping me from getting a better job, I'd quit this afternoon.
I don't blame you. But thank goodness you're stuck here because we really need someone to make the coffee.
Welcome back to Inside Scoop Virginia. My guest today is Doug Dinenny, naval aviator, currently works for Boeing, is running his first time political office. He's running for Congress. He has one opponent, Leslie Byrne, at this point. There may be others in the race before the primary filing deadline is over in April. We shall see. But today we're focusing on Doug, but I want to assure you that as this season goes on, I'm going to have them each on individually, every candidate on the Democratic side, and hopefully on the Republican side as well. We'll hopefully get them all in here and let them mix it up in a debate, and we'll see how it goes. We want to make sure that the public fully understands who these candidates are, and hopefully once they've seen both sides, both parties' candidates, they'll understand why they have to vote Democratic, not only in the primary, but in the general election as well. Let's get into the environment. You know, there are many multiple facets of it. The Potomac is apparently not getting cleaned up as well as we want, neither is Chesapeake Bay. We have all the new green movement. We have the whole global warming issue. I mean, Al Gore just won a Nobel Prize for it. What do we do? What do we do? We've got fuel efficiency standards.
Right.
How do we deal with it?
Well, first of all, I bring experience to this issue. I'm a member of the Fairfax County Environmental Quality Advisory Council, referred to as the EQAC. For those out there that are interested, there's going to be a public hearing this Tuesday night at the Government Center at 7:30. You can come on in and ask questions of those of us members of the EQAC. Every year we provide an annual report on the environment, and you did highlight several of the issues and the challenges that we have. We cover everything from what you said with global warming to water issues to what we can do about animals that are running around Fairfax County and what they're doing to pollution in the stream. So it's a very important issue. A couple things. First of all, we need to do better at the federal level with the environment. We just passed, the Congress just passed the CAFE standards increase. Took a lot of effort to get us up to 35 miles per gallon by 2020. That number is still below numbers that exist right now overseas. For instance, the French are going to be just under 50 miles per gallon by 2012. I think 49 miles per gallon. We need to do more, better. We consider ourselves, in many ways, the bright, shining beacon on the hill. And I know that people have used that expression before, but we are the dingy beacon right now in the environment. So we need at the federal level more leadership to happen, not only in the executive branch, but also in the congressional branch to bring special interests together. What can we do? Well, we need to start looking very hard at renewable energy sources. We need to, I think we'll talk about transportation in a minute. Obviously with the vehicles, with the CAFE standards, we need to spend more investment in light rail. Other sources aside from automobiles, secure force of metro funding. We need to look at cap and trade systems. We need to take a look at how are we producing our power in this country, primarily through coal power plants, and how much that is providing carbon into the air. So things we can do with capturing the carbon, things we can do with changing standards, and let's sign the Kyoto Protocol.
Does it serve our purposes? Obviously, coal provides a relatively cheap source, and it's mined in Western Virginia and in West Virginia and in Pennsylvania and elsewhere in Colorado. it's a fairly cheap energy source as our energy costs are rising.
Right.
And does it matter how much we reduce our emissions from coal when in China every smokestack is belching out, you know, putrid, noxious emissions that we have almost no control over? Do we increase our own energy costs and reduce our footprint ever so slightly, but at the same time costing us one more trade advantage with China and costing our consumers more money in terms of the cost of the energy that they receive? How do we deal with that?
Well, we deal with our issue first, and our issue is that we are not good in how we deal with our coal-powered plants. We do not incentivize enough for these producers to capture the carbon emissions, and we don't have a good cap and trade system in place to do that. So to answer your question, we need to clean up our own house and continue to then apply leadership and pressure to the Chinese, because right now we are not standing in a position of strength on this issue. We cannot.
No, we don't even sign the Kyoto Protocol.
Right, exactly. So we need a position of strength.
We're not setting an example, certainly.
And so that's the way we need it. Fix our house, at the same time apply pressure on China. And then by fixing our own house, we have got the brightest people. We have great engineers, people that are going to continue. When we incentivize this, we can now have our best and brightest working on these renewable energy sources. And let's look for that breakthrough that we need that we could then apply to China and other places.
Do we move to more nuclear? Or as George Bush says, nuclear, whatever he says, nuclear, I can't even pronounce it the way he pronounces it in his Crawford accent. But 30 years ago, nuclear became a dirty word.
Right.
You know, there were problems, 3 Mile Island, what happened in the Soviet Union, the cost overruns on building some of these plants. As a young reporter, I covered the siting and the whole process from the beginning of the siting of the Seabrook nuclear power plant in Seabrook, New Hampshire, and it ultimately bankrupted the utility there, and ultimately was bought by another utility. New Hampshire now has some of the highest electricity costs in the country. But even the environmentalists are looking now at nuclear power as, in reality, being cleaner. The new technologies make it relatively safer. What do you think?
I think it's a great idea. I think as a Democrat and as an environmentalist, I believe that we need to continue to expand our nuclear power production in the United States. It is a clean fuel. The challenge, of course, is regulation. We need to keep very, very tight oversight. As a naval officer, I lived on board nuclear reactors.
Yeah, that's true. Submarines and aircraft carriers, et cetera. Yeah,
spent 30 days on board a submarine and spent months on board nuclear-powered aircraft carriers. It's not a comfortable thought, but I think that most Americans, as they start looking at the alternatives, the NIMBYs are very upset about what we'll do with the waste, but there's things with vitrification, taking the waste and enclosing it in very safe glass and burying it. I know it's not a perfect solution.
I have some pellets that they sent. This debate has been going on for years.
A long time.
When I was on the Hill, and again, I haven't been on the Hill in 20 years, 20 plus years, I actually worked there. But they were sending us glass pellets then to show us what the fuel would look like when it was buried in terms of being safe.
Yeah. I mean, it's a mindset that we need to continue to, we need to be smart about it, but the technology is developed, the oversight is there, and it's a great investment, I think, for us for the future. And Europe gets it, they're doing it. We have stayed away from it because, like you mentioned before, it's much cheaper to do coal. It's a lot more expensive to do nuclear in the short term, but in the long term with the environment, I think we'll win, increasing our nuclear production.
Let's go into transportation a little bit more. I'm going to hit you from an odd place. Our airline industry, all of a sudden, I traveled extensively for 20 years. I mean, tens of thousands of miles a year on business. And I was able to get on and off planes, et cetera. We didn't have, we had security, but nothing like it is now. And I'm not convinced that it's actually that much better than it was before in terms of the security. There was a period of time when they first tried the whole Transportation Security Administration, where they had retired and former police officers and federal officers who manned the experimental processes where they did this in Baltimore and a couple of places, and it was efficient as could be. Now we've gone back to sort of a different type of employee who's working in these security roles, and it just seems that it becomes very tedious. The rules change all the time. But that's only, we talked about the security side a bit, but these planes are running almost full now.
Right.
And the airline industry's still not getting rich.
Right.
They're running almost full. There are horror stories where people, if you miss a plane, you may be stranded for a day or a day and a half now. Some of that stemmed from the whole area deregulation, and because of deregulation, these airlines have more ability to do what they choose, and obviously, you know, they certainly have a right to try and make money, and it's tough for them with the fuel costs rising and the like.
Right.
I know the Congress is starting to look at this issue because it's affecting so many of their constituents, and quite frankly, it affects them going home sometimes as well. Even they can't make multiple plane reservations like they used to.
Right.
So how do we deal, you can expand on the transportation issue but for about a minute.
Okay.
Because I do want to give you about a minute to talk to the viewers as well.
Right.
But how do we deal with these issues? Where do we go? How do we solve them? They just seem to be getting worse.
Well, let me talk locally just real briefly on transportation. Biggest issue coming up locally is what we're going to do with the metro through the Tysons area. I am a big proponent of the tunnel. About a year ago, I wrote a letter into the Washington Post, went on record my positions on Tyson's Land Use Task Force. We did some great work putting resolutions through EQAC, the Environmental Quality Advisory Council of the board, and also the Tyson's Land Use Task Force. Let's look towards the tunnel solution, because by putting an above ground aerial route through Tyson's Corner, it's going to be a barrier, not only affecting the efficiency of people using the metro, but also pedestrians and also automobiles.
Let me ask you a quick question on that. Are we better to have nothing than have an aerial route? Because it seems to me the Federal Transit Administration has made it pretty clear, and are not only Republicans, but several members of Congress have made it very clear. They made it clear to the governor that it's not going to happen. So do we scuttle the whole thing and start from scratch, which probably won't happen in our lifetime, or do we move ahead with what exists? And I'm not convinced we're still going to get the Federal Transit Administration money, even for the above ground route.
That's exactly right. That $900 million is still out there because it is an untenable, there was no competitive bidding for the tunnel side. I think it's a false choice to say either or. It is a good debate question to present it in those frames, but I think that there is a middle position, and that is that the federal government knows the $900 million isn't going to be happening, or if it isn't happening, it's got to happen very soon. We need to ensure that there's a open competitive bidding process for the tunnel. We need to make sure that we don't use a sole source contractor. They picked Bechtel, did the big dig in Boston. You know how well that turned out. So that is a big issue. I think it's a false choice to say either or, but this is a generational decision that was made by putting it above ground versus below ground, and it's a decision I think that we need to revisit.
I'm not going to have the opportunity to let you talk to the voters tonight, but there'll be ample opportunities between now and June on this show, I promise you. Our guest tonight was Doug Dinanni. He's a Democrat running in the primary for the 11th Congressional District. Thank you for watching, and we'll have more.